Just gone a little after 9:30 CIT. Thank you for staying with us on Newsfeed PM, the late edition. The COVID-19 pandemic has negatively affected many economies globally. For many poor and heavily indebted countries in Africa with smaller economies, the blow has been devastating. Many have had to further borrow from the International Monetary Fund just to survive the pandemic. How do African countries recover from the pandemic and rebuild their economies? For some, the answer lies in decolonisation of Africa's economies and a complete integration of the African continent. Joining me to take a look at this is Diaz Reese, Africa Chief Executive, Yamkela Makopula. Yamkela, very good evening. Thank you for speaking to us. Decolonising Africa's economies makes for interesting reading. Please expound on that.
Thank you so much, Hugo. Happy Africa Day. And I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. First of all, I just want to explain what decolonization of African economies means, because most people say, but I mean, this happened years ago. Why are we still having this conversation? And if we were to decolonize, where would it start? And what are the implications of it? Number one, COVID has really showed us that, unfortunately, if we try to achieve anything as African countries one by one, we are not going to make it. And when I speak about decolonization of African economies, I'm going to take you to the fact that it has to be a will that comes from political leaders, from the AU, to decolonize these economies. And what that means, and what we saw actually practically during COVID-19, when this will came, it was when Africa was in the deep issue of most African countries not having the funds to go and buy and procure vaccines. And political leaders had to sit together at the time that President Cyril Ramaphosa was at the helm of the chairmanship. They sat together and he formed a committee where there had to be innovative ways of making sure that every country in Africa will get the vaccine. And through that process, then it went to as far as an Afreximbank was engaged in order to procure on behalf of these African countries. Now there was a political will. And that's what happens when there's a political will. It opens a way for things to happen in Africa. When we speak about decolonization in 2021, we speak about the fact that today we are still, as Africans, still unable to trade freely with one another due to the fact that when you send your goods from South Africa to Nigeria and you are a small business owner, they will be stuck in their customs for weeks and even months, and you have to pay expensive tax. And by the time they come out, you have paid so much money that Africans are unable to trade with one another freely. Actually, there is no interest. And 80% to 90% of Africans, they travel via roads. They don't travel via, they don't fly like you and I. But if you go and look at our infrastructure today, it does not allow Africans to trade with one another. I make an example about a road that was done in 2016 between Mombasa and Addis. And that's where you see that when there's a political will between two African leaders to actually put money into this road, because what would happen is that during the rainy season, it would take about 3 days for trucks to move from one side to the other. And there's fresh produce that has to be taken to the other side. The food would get rotten. Here I want to speak about practicalities and not speak about things that people will not understand. So it will take about 3 days. And by the time the food gets on the other side, it's rotten and it has to be thrown away. In 2016, when that road was finally done and the two countries had put money into it, guess what happened? Trade between the two countries went up by 400% because what used to be 3 days would take about 6 hours. That is the power of political will and leadership when they come and decolonize. Because we didn't create these custom rules ourselves. We didn't create these borders ourselves. This is a colonial system that was created by someone else to make it easier for me in South Africa to fly to Paris. It takes me 10 hours than to fly to Ghana, where I have to start in Addis, move from Addis to Ghana, and spend 16 hours. By the time you get there, you can't even get on your first meeting. So those are the things that we need to be looking at.
Now,
Thanks, Hugo.
Something else that I suggest we look at is the fact that Nigeria is the world's 15th largest crude oil producer, but Nigeria also imports petrol. Does this speak to the decolonization that you mentioned that is required? I mean, this certainly would seem absurd.
It is absurd, and you make an example about Nigeria, but there's just many more. When it comes to industrialization, it was probably the first thing that Africa neglected, because it just doesn't make sense, Hugo, that the fact that with all the resources that we have, which we are so highly dependent on, we are happy to send them as raw as they are outside in order for someone else to go and turn them into things that will produce and make money and grow their own economies. But as Africans, there is no manufacturing. I'm going to go back to the issue of the pandemic. I attended the African vaccine manufacturing meeting that was put together by the heads of states at the African Union last month. And some of the embarrassing facts that came out of that meeting, the fact that Africa, outside COVID, we need about 1.3 billion vaccines every year. But we are only manufacturing 1%. And we only have 10 manufacturing vaccine facilities in Africa, whereas we make the 25% of the world's demand of vaccines every year. So these kind of examples, these are the examples that are showing that if Africans, and not just now political leaders, because there's also industry leaders that need to be speaking to one another and saying, how do we grow industries, African industries? And how do we just make sure that there is swift trade? The Free Continental Trade Agreement has been put in place, but I keep telling everyone that's a legal framework, it's a guideline. It's there to say these are the rules of doing business in Africa. These are the rules of traveling in Africa. But then it has to be implemented by us on day-to-day basis. So I fully agree with you. What's happening in Nigeria is unacceptable. And the time has come that actually no more should Europe or East or West or China should be able to come to Africa and make agreements with one country, because those agreements are the ones that are killing us. We need that central place that is the African Free Continental Trade, where there is rules of engagement, so that what is being done in East Africa is also being done, is replicated in West, and we are all speaking the same language. Otherwise, right now, people are making and doing agreements that are just self-fulfilling. It depends on who is running the country in that particular moment, and things keep changing every 5 years. As a result, there is no longevity on any of the African projects, the big projects that are supposed to be made making a change in Africa.
Yamkela, your final thoughts. Now, I don't suppose that it's as simple as Nigeria or any other country deciding that they are going to trade globally on their own terms. I mean, if we look, for instance, at Ghana and their decision to stop selling cocoa to Switzerland because of beneficiation, and the fact that they were exporting cocoa to Switzerland and having to pay an arm and a leg for chocolate, it certainly didn't make sense. So outside of Africa and its leadership deciding to try and certainly influence the global trade, what is the backlash that they can expect from the West? Because I'm sure the West will not sit by and let Africa trade on its own terms.
Actually, that backlash has started already when, we formed the Free Continental Trade, because, there were comments that are we deglobalizing Africa, taking it away and removing it from the world. And the answer is very clear. We are actually cleaning our house. We are restructuring here at home in order for us to be able to have a say when we get to the rest of the world. We can't continue, Hugo, with the approach of us being looked at as the beggars that are needing more and more assistance from everywhere, when we have the skills in Africa to uplift the African continent. Actually, by Africa being skilled, by Africa trading with each other, by Africa growing their own GDP, it makes us even a better global player for the rest of the world. So that's how we should be looking at this. How do the leaders look at that backlash? I think the time has come for the leaders in Africa to actually go back to the time of Kwame Nkrumah, who made it very clear, and he said, unite or die. We're seeing it during COVID time. If we don't unite after this COVID in order for us to recover as Africa, we will die and will need yet another savior that is either Asia or East or West. We can't. For your generation and my generation, the time to depend on anyone else is done and dusted. We need to take the helm and start doing these things. Unfortunately, most of the leaders that have been leading for over 20, 30 years, they've got legacy issues and agreements that they've got. It's time for the young leadership to be us, the ones that are pushing the agenda of integration, because we understand what it means. Just from me having your farm, my farm, and you having yours, and someone else, and us combining that and making and coming into a partnership and looking for a partner in Ghana and trading with one another. That's how we should be thinking. We should not be thinking, oh, I'm only having my own business in South Africa. We should be thinking, how far else can I go? Every time we speak about investment, people want to fly to Europe, whereas the returns that are there and the interest that are there, the interest rate is so high. When you could be looking around Africa, go to Angola, go to Ghana, go to Nigeria, but we are told, oh no, it's too risky. Come on. More than the money that you have to pay for the rest of your life from what you have borrowed in Europe, let's take the risk together as Africans, and let's put legal frameworks and make sure that it is easy to enter these African countries. So for me, what I'm saying is that it is time for the young generation to look at integration of the African economies, because that's our responsibility.
Yamkela Mokopula, thank you very much. That was Diaz Reese, Africa Chief Executive. Yamkela Mokopula speaking to us this evening.